fermented foods, and all of those foods have a place as well. Okay. One of the biggest things also that I want people to understand is that there is no one nutrition strategy that works for everyone. Just because your friend is doing it or your fellow racer is doing it or the person that just won is doing it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. You've got to figure out what's going to make sense for you. And there's a lot of factors that come into play there. And we'll talk about more of those tonight. Okay. The final thing is that consistency is key. Perfection is never the goal with nutrition. This is sometimes hard for type A athletes to wrap their heads around because they're either like on or they're off. They're doing it or they're not doing it. It's like, I'm going all in or I'm throwing in the towel. But that is not sustainable and that's not realistic for basically all of us. So I would much rather you be consistent and have some plan A's and also have some plan B's and probably some plan C's that are executed on rather than have plan A's across the board and then burn out 2 weeks from now and start all over again. Okay. So that's where we're at. All right. What we're going to talk about tonight, pre-workout nutrition. What should you do before a race, before a workout? And then we're going to talk about during training and racing. And then we're going to talk about post-workout recovery strategies, how to make the most of these efforts and set yourself up for the next day. And then Q&A session, resource sharing. You know, like Tyler said, I am happy to answer questions as we go. So feel free to just take yourself off mute or pop something in the chat and I'll stop and it'll give me a break from chatting, which is helpful and appreciated. So I'm not just talking to an empty room for the next 45 minutes. But also if there's something that you want to get to at the end, if you have like a specific scenario or anything like that you want to chat through, I'm happy to answer questions at the end as well. Okay. Sound good? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, I love it. We can talk in the chat too. I'm looking at that. So I appreciate the engagement in there, even if you guys aren't on video. Before we roll into the content, I do want to talk about some of the most common misconceptions in sports nutrition. These are 3 myths that I think are important to bust, if you will. The first one, I have to follow the rules. Like nutrition can be a very challenging topic because it's different for everyone and it's impossible to make rules that apply to everyone. So just because one person is gluten-free or dairy-free doesn't mean that you should be, just because they're doing it, right? Just because one person is following a fueling strategy that seems to work for them doesn't mean that you can replicate it and then it's going to work for you. Just because someone is doing all gels and sports nutrition products doesn't mean that that's what you have to do to be successful. Just because somebody is following some sort of trending diet doesn't mean that that's what you need. Context is key. There are no rules. You get to make your own rules. All right. That's first and foremost. Next, you're not broken if you don't want to or you can't tolerate gels and bars and goos as your primary source of fuel during races, during training. Sometimes people can tolerate that stuff, and that's totally fine. They've trained their bodies over the years to tolerate those types of foods, and sometimes just by random chance they happen to be able to tolerate that. But the thing is that you don't have to be that way to be successful. Okay. There's a ton of really good food choices that you can use to fuel your workouts and your races. And I'll give you some examples later on in this workshop. Yeah, donuts. Exactly. Like if that's more exciting to you than looking at yet another gel, then figure out a way to consume a donut instead. Because if you can't stand the thought of another gel, but that's your only fuel source, you're probably not going to fuel with it and you're going to be underfueled. And I would much rather you have a donut and be fueled adequately than skip out on your gel because you can't even stomach the thought of looking at it. All right. Sometimes it's more messy, but that's okay. It's worth it. Promise. I should eat less to get faster and more fit. This is probably one of the most dangerous beliefs that we have just been programmed to believe, especially when you're a junior athlete who is also growing into the body that you're going to live in for the rest of your life. All right. Just by being in this state of growth, you have increased needs. And when you add to that fact that all of you athletes want to perform at your best and you're doing active things on a regular basis, especially throughout the summer, your needs are even higher. And you're probably going to be surprised by how high they are. So what happens when you don't eat enough foods to support your needs? The efforts will feel more difficult. In addition to that, your performance declines. You do not feel as good as you should. You are not reaching your full potential when you're underfueled and not supporting all of this. Okay. This doesn't mean that you should just eat more milkshakes and candy bars, but it does mean that you need to consider whether or not you're actually eating enough food to perform, because this is a superpower if we use it strategically. Um, the thing is here is that like we need to just totally throw out the idea that if I eat less, I'm going to weigh less, and if I eat more, I'm going to weigh more, because it's not that simple. Okay. We have to look at performance. And when we do that and we allow our body to utilize fuel as a source of fuel rather than be predisposed to store it because it's not getting enough, that's when the magic happens. Okay. So let's talk about eating enough. This is one of the most common variables that we see impacting anyone's ability to finally understand how good they should actually be feeling. And this is important for performance and energy, but it's also important for me to bring up because it can be hard to eat enough. We have really busy schedules to stick to. It's pretty easy for a lot of us to just forget to eat for multiple hours throughout the day. So sometimes it's just hard to fit it all in, right? Like you're in class, you're working, you're driving, you're going from one thing to the next. You're kind of at the mercy of someone else's schedule, whatever that might be. So I want to explain this a bit more to give you some tips on how to make sure that each one of you is eating enough. Okay. So first off, like eating enough just doesn't not just as simple as saying like, oh, I'm 500 calories behind. Like I'm going to add in a certain amount of like extra 500 calories at any and all points throughout my day. The when and what you eat more of is really important here. Okay. So this comes down to eating the right fuel at the right times when your body is going to utilize that fuel to support your performance and your energy and your needs in the moment. And a lot of that for athletes comes down to, are we adequately fueling right before, during, and after our efforts? And then are we avoiding like too big of gaps between that within our day? Okay. So here are some signs that we can look at to kind of assess like, are we eating enough? All right. The best way to do this is to often look at what's likely happening if you're not eating enough. If you're regularly going more than 3 to 4 hours without eating on a regular basis, you're likely not eating enough. And this can even be more like every 2 to 3 hours for my junior athletes that have a ton going on and they're also growing, especially those that it might be going through a growth spurt or something like that. Like the more we can get in smaller amounts but more frequently. I mean, first of all, it's a lot easier for us to consume a small meal or a regular sized snack than it is to consume 3 large meals that you have to sit down for and take, 10, 15 minutes to consume. So if we can get in those small opportunities to consume fuel throughout the day, that's a win, especially for my junior athletes. Okay. So what we don't want to do is eat a small breakfast, right? And then head out the door. And then suddenly it's 11 a.m. and we've gone from 6:30 or 7 to 11 or 12 and we haven't eaten anything. Those are the kind of gaps to notice and look for. Okay. Now, if you get to your next meal and snack and you tend to overeat because you're so hungry, you find it hard to control your snacking, right? Like that kind of stuff. That's likely because you're going too long without eating. You're creating too much of a deficit and then you're overcompensating for it later on. Another sign. If you're having a hard time finding the energy to show up for your workouts, for your training, plus the demands of life, that's another sign that you're probably not eating enough. You should be able to do both. This shows up as like energy crashes in the afternoon, or you have a hard, long workout, right? Like a long ride on the long ride. What is it? Do you do them on Thursdays still? Long ride Thursdays? Big ride Thursday?
That's with the town of Breck used to do those. I don't know if they're doing them
Okay.
anymore, but we have some longer
Yeah.
endurance rides this season in the
Yeah.
mornings. Yeah.
Right. So that kind of stuff, like longest effort, it's like, hey, we should be able to show up for everything else throughout the day as well, you know? So that's the kind of stuff where if you have to choose between your workout or doing what you want to do for the rest of the day, then that's a sign that we're not eating enough. And then if you have periods of intense hunger, this can show up as lightheadedness, trouble concentrating, especially for younger athletes, thinking about food all the time, or that quintessential, like your stomach is growling. Those are all signs that we're not eating enough. Okay. I want to hear in the chat from everyone, like, do you feel like any of these numbers, 1 through 4, apply to you, one more than the other, anything like that? Does this make sense?
I'll add a few experiences from myself that I've experienced before.
Yeah.
I think another one, poor sleep at night, sometimes
Yes.
if you're not eating enough. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but just like snacking at night, especially on like sugary carb
Yep.
stuff, is another thing. And I've experienced it, I've learned from it, and I've corrected it. It's not a bad thing, but those are a few that I've personally witnessed myself, especially as like training volume ticks up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good point is the like, hey, getting to the end of your night and when you are kind of like, oh, I'm at home again, I'm in my kitchen, I'm kind of winding down and now I just can't stop snacking, then that would be a good opportunity to think, like, how did my day go? Did I have a bunch of gaps in between eating? Did I fuel my workout adequately? Or might I be coming into this evening in such a great deficit that now that my body and my brain is kind of like less stimulated, I'm just tunnel vision to, like you said, like the carbohydrates, the high carb sweet foods, that kind of stuff. Like that's your body giving you a sign that something is missing. It's not a bad thing, but it's feedback. So super helpful feedback as well. Good stuff. Nick said all of them. One makes sense. One, four for Cody. Yes to all of them. Awesome. Anderson, two. Okay, perfect. Yep, good stuff. Okay, so here are the actionables. What you can do about this. The main thing here, like, doesn't have to be super complicated. The number one most significant change you can make to ensure that you're eating enough is to eat a snack or a meal at least every 3 to 4 hours. And I'll say this again, for some, it might be every 2 to 3 hours instead of every 3 to 4 hours. All right. Um, for everyone, this is going to look slightly different, but as a start, every single one of you can start by like just setting a timer. It doesn't have to be every single day of the week, but check in with yourself. Like set a timer for every 2.5 to 3 hours. Hey, what do I have going on right now? What is my next hour going to look like? Am I going to be able to eat or should I eat something now because I'm going to be busy in something for the next 2 hours? And if it's another 2 hours, then I'm going 5 hours without eating. And then I'm in a greater deficit. I'm in a bigger hole. I'm in more trouble. So check in with yourself. If you're constantly experiencing this, set a timer just to remind yourself, whether it's like on your watch or on your phone or something like that. Um, in terms of what to eat, that often depends on what you have the capacity for in the moment, right? Like sometimes you can grab a balanced meal, sit down, eat it with a fork or a spoon. Other times, all you have time for is a snack, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can be either a meal or a snack. Um, so like I've got bars in my desk drawer. I've got them in the center console of my truck. I've got them in my basket that I bring with me everywhere. It's basically like my car basket. It goes from my car to my house and back and forth, and my workout bag, just in case I need something to fill in the gap because I find myself like, oh shoot, I'm out here longer than I thought I was going to be, that kind of stuff. So I want to give you some metrics for this, some staple go-to snacks and what to think about here, because often what I find is that the meals are like generally the easier ones, but it's the snacks to fill in the gaps that become more challenging. Okay. And what we can look for here is we're looking for protein for satiety, or we call it hunger prevention. And then we're looking for carbohydrate for energy. We don't want just protein because we're still going to feel like taking a nap at 3 p.m. We don't want just carbohydrate because we're going to get a quick blood sugar spike and some energy, but then it's going to crash and we're going to feel hungry again in 20 or 30 minutes. We want a combination of both. Okay. So, snack ideas, easy snack ideas with enough protein to keep you from getting hungry again in 30 minutes and also some carbs to give you some energy. Does anyone have any kind of staple go-to snacks that they want to add to this list? Any questions about your go-tos that you're consuming right now? This is, these ones are like, we want to have a combination of ones that you are making at home that require a little bit more prep, but we also want to have some super simple ones that you can have on the go, right? Like sometimes it might be like an apple or a banana with a handful of nuts, or an apple or banana with like a little packet of Justin's nut butter. We have it in the car or on the go or something like that. That's why I have the Rebel protein drink or the Koa protein drinks, like those have a solid amount of protein, more than 10 grams of protein with also some carbohydrates. Energy bars with more than 10 grams of protein, typically like less than 15 grams or so of carbohydrates, is a good balance of protein to carbohydrates to give you that combination of hunger prevention plus energy. So screenshot this, take a photo of it, look at it in the slide deck that I'll send you a copy of. There's also some more ideas here that it's basically like, all right, pick a protein, pick a simple carb or pick a complex carb. You would pick a simple carb if you are about to work out, or if you're, if you need just something that's more quickly digesting. You would pick a complex carb if you're more like in the middle of your school day or just hanging out that day, or you have a little bit more wiggle room for more complex fuel, basically. Choose simple carbs when you're eating a snack 1 hour to 30 minutes before your workout. Complex carbs anytime after or away from your workouts, basically, is another way to think about it. So I'll share this as well. Okay. Snacks, huge. Yes, please consume snacks. Okay. For meals, I like to use the performance plates model, which gives you an idea of how to change the ratio of macros, proteins, carbs, plants, fats on your plates based on what kind of training you did or did not do that day. So this is the athlete's plate model, which I think can be super, super helpful for parents as well to figure out, like a lot of times I'm working with families, right? Where I'm working with one person in the family. It might be the parent, and they're like, well, okay, I've got to be cooking food for my entire family. So that means we're having the same types of food, but the ratio of carbohydrates to protein to plants that you put on your plate versus what your junior athlete puts on their plate can be different. And that's the informed decision that we get to make, right? Do we need more carbohydrates? Do we need a plate that's, instead of this baseline for one of my athletes, right? Maybe they have a race the next day. They're going to fill their plate with more carbohydrates. They're going to decrease the vegetables a little bit. Instead of over here on the easy training, you're going to have more plants, more vegetables, less carbohydrates. So this can be a really nice way to think about, okay, we're having the same food, the same macros, but different ratios of those macros. Okay.
Yuri, can I point out something that I see here on these three plates?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm specifically speaking to this to people here, to us as like cyclists, and primarily most of our group is endurance cyclists. So one thing I see across all these plates that doesn't change, protein. I think protein is super overhyped and marketed to
Mm-hmm.
everyone. And I just want, and maybe you can back me up a little bit here, more Yuri, while still important, and there's more, I believe, research that has come out that us as endurance athletes do need more protein. Since like the original research, I think it's like, I don't know, 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram. I'm not sure exactly, but it's so overhyped. And the biggest thing
Yes.
that I want to for all you to think about, is the carbs side of things, or the grains. Like that is really what us as cyclists, fuel on. Not saying that we shouldn't keep out protein nor healthy fats or anything like that, but I've I grew up in the Midwest, and I know people who just put a slab of meat on their plate and that's all they eat. And like I don't think anyone should be doing that, but for us as cyclists, specifically as endurance cyclists, we need the carbs, we need the grains for energy. We still
Yep.
need the protein, we need everything else, but I just don't, want people to think like that's the only thing that their athlete or that they need to eat just because of big marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, right? Is you look at these images, and the protein proportion on the plate is the same no matter if we're doing easy training or hard training. It's the carbohydrate ratios that change. It's the plant ratios that change here. So that's a great thing to point out. Is I think I don't know why. There's many reasons why actually, but we have also been taught to believe that after every single workout, no matter the workout, protein is the priority. It's like gym culture taught us that decades ago. And for some reason that has managed to stay as something that people believe when they're not looking at the context of there's a very big difference between a strength-based athlete and endurance-based athlete. Your primary source of fuel and the primary source of energy that you deplete and need to replace is carbohydrates for athletes, especially for younger athletes, because they have a higher need for carbohydrates. Their brain is working harder, faster, more intently than our brain is working, which our brain's primary source of fuel is carbohydrates. Okay. So it's huge. And it's not to say that you need to start eating more candy and more cake and more milkshakes only. Carbohydrates come from whole grains, like you said, Tyler. Carbohydrates come from potatoes and peas and corn and from cereals and oats and rice and pasta. And those can be combined with vegetables and fruits and all those kind of things as well. So yes, there's also a time for those simple carbohydrates, like finishing an event and being like, yeah, I'm going to recover with a milkshake because that sounds delicious. Or I'm going to eat my favorite gummy when I'm out there training because that's delicious. But there's room for all these other things as well. And yeah, in a world where it's just like more protein, more protein, more protein, we have to think about, well, does that actually apply to me? Because really, we should be also thinking about what are my carb needs? What are my carb needs? What are my carb needs? I probably need more carbs as an endurance athlete. One way to look at this as well, for those of you that are in charge of preparing meals, like we always want to include a protein plus a carbohydrate plus plants plus a healthy fat for any meal that we are preparing, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. That's ideal. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but perfection is not the goal. But if I walk out into the kitchen at the end of my day and I have to make a decision about what I'm going to put on the table for myself and my family, my first question that I'm asking is, what's my protein? Do I need to pull something out of the freezer? Do I have something available in the fridge that needs to be used? And then I go from there. I'm like, all right, awesome. What plants do I have? And then I'm like, okay, let's make sure there's a carbohydrate, especially if any or all of us had a hard day today. I'm going to make sure that there's a carbohydrate. And then is there a healthy fat? And that's my checklist, my mental checklist in my head. I want to make sure that in my kitchen on any given day, I always have at least a few proteins, at least a variety of plants, at least a solid dose of carbohydrates in multiple forms, and some healthy fats. Okay. All right. Let's see. I want to make sure this changes. Why is this not? Oh, this is not changing because of this. Okay. So now we're here, right? We went from this, um, the athlete's plate. I will share this, actually, this link in the chat for anyone that wants the athlete's plate. And I'm also going to share balanced snack PDF in the chat. Okay. Now let's get into this
Hey Yuri,
pre-race.
Yuri,
Yeah.
could I just say one more thing before you get into this one? And
Mm-hmm.
about eating enough. Like, I just want everyone to know too, like, I believe that is such like a foundational thing to get down. Eating enough, as Yuri mentioned before, that's probably the thing she comes across most with all her athletes. And eating enough means eating enough, before, during, and after training and outside of training. But I just look at it as so foundational because I also believe, when, kids start getting into, racing and they're seeing what others do, and then they start seeing things like 90 to 120 grams of carbs per hour sort of thing, and they just go right to that. But if you're not
Mm-hmm.
feeling yourself adequately and eating enough on a day by day basis, it really doesn't even matter how you're feeling before, during, and after because you're missing out on all the other thing, of eating enough outside of that. So I just, just like biking, you work on the foundational things with your nutrition, eating enough, and then you progress and get into nutrient or timing, and those things.
Yeah.
So I really want everyone to take that away and like come back to that side, find ways to make sure that they are eating enough because kids, especially in summer, and they wake up, they go to camps, they have bike practices in the evenings. Like there's so much going on, and sure, it's really easy, for them to not eat enough. So I really want to just put emphasis on making sure that everyone on this call, is doing that.
It honestly is. You're totally right. It's the foundation for everything else. If that is not there, we are building on a unstable foundation, basically. And we're just throwing band-aid solutions on top of it, like trying to get in, 90 grams of carbs per hour. So it's what you do most like every single day, regardless of your training or not, you still have to eat outside of exercise. So it is truly the foundation. And I think in the work that I've worked with hundreds of athletes. 90% of them come to me and they're not eating enough. And that can range from my junior athletes to my master's athletes and every single one in between. My athlete that's training for the Olympics right now to my athlete that's just like, hey, I just want to feel better doing what I want to continue to do. Right. And it's just like it's not easy to eat enough. It takes time and it takes intention, but it is truly like one of the most important things. And it gets easier the more intention you add to it. It doesn't have to be
You
complicated. Something is always better than nothing.
Do you have any other tips like outside of what you shared to ensure that someone is eating enough? Like I know there's calculators online. You can get a rough
Mm-hmm.
calculation for your calorie needs. Obviously, it's not an exact, to the point, but is there anything else
Yeah.
like outside of that? Because I know like it takes into consideration if you're male or female, your weight, your activity level. Like that's one I've used in the past and like, oh, here's about how much I need to get per
Mm-hmm.
day, and then I adjust the amount up or down based kind of on my training. But, you know, do you have anything else, that you'd add to that or to like ensure everyone, is eating enough? I'm not
Yeah.
real big on calorie counting, but it
Yeah.
does work. If you sometimes I just do it every year or so. Like I just
Yep.
do a little log for 3 to 5 days to see like, hey, just to create that awareness, like of where I'm at. But then I
Yep.
like to rely on the signals like you just said earlier because like it's just way too stressful to count for me. Not
It
saying
is.
that is for everyone. Some people, don't mind doing that, but I think the majority would prefer not to count every meal and snack that they eat.
Yeah, it's a tool that can be utilized to check in on yourself, see what's going on, and give you some context and some awareness. But yeah, it's not something that I want people to rely on because we have to focus on honoring our hunger and satiety cues as well, right? Like if I think really honestly, the consistency of making sure that you're not going too long between eating meals and snacks is key here for anyone and everyone. And then we throw in a little bit of, okay, well, if you don't feel super hungry, but you know you need to eat, have a smaller size snack and then have another meal later on. The time on the clock doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be eating. It's more so like, how are you feeling right now? What did you just do? What are you about to do? What's the time available that you have? And you go from there. So I can't give any recommendations or ranges based because there's such a wide range of people that are on this call from, like the junior athletes to the adults and everything in between. Um, it's not just about calories. It's about, I think it's really, really important, especially for younger athletes to continue to be able to utilize hunger and satiety cues because that's a skill that we're all born with. But as we get older, it's really easy to lose that skill to be able to honor our hunger and satiety cues because we're inundated with all these rules and all these things that will dictate when we eat and what we eat outside of what our true needs are. So there's a lot that goes into that. This is something that I work on with all of my individual athletes to like really understand what their true needs are. But instead of trying to hit some sort of macro goal or calorie goal, I'm first looking at, well, what can we do in the moment with each eating opportunity you have? And if you're eating 3 balanced meals, and if you're eating 2 snacks throughout the day, at least in between those meals, right? Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, and you're eating to hunger and fullness, that is a pretty good way to make sure that you're eating enough. If you're creating those big gaps, if you're forgetting to eat, if you're overeating in the evening, those are all signs that you're just not getting enough. Okay. So pre-race and training, right? Like what should I eat beforehand? How do I time this? You want to plan your food intake and eat your last balanced meal, like we just talked about with those athletes' plates, with protein, carbohydrates, plants, fats, about 2 to 3 hours before to allow time for digestion. 2.5 for some people, 2 hours for some people. This very much depends on like what people can tolerate, but that's a safe bet. This is because it takes at least an hour and a half for your body to start digesting the food and turning it into energy. Okay. Basically, you want to be satiated when you begin your workout, but not stuffed and definitely not hungry. Now, you'll need to size your meals and snacks accordingly because this is a very individual thing, but that's a thing to think about is like, okay, I'm doing a race or I'm doing a big workout. When was the last time I had a meal? Again, balanced meal, protein, plants, carbohydrate, healthy fat. Plants can be fruits or vegetables, doesn't matter, but that's what a balanced meal looks like. All right. So now, if we're past that last meal, like 2.5, 3 hours out from your start, these are your guidelines for that window and the time less than 2 hours to go. Because the misconception here that I don't want people to get caught up in is like, I can't eat anything if I have less than 2 hours before my workout. Okay. So this is really, really important too, because most of you will need, especially if it's been more than 2 hours since you had a meal, you'll need a pre-race snack, pre-training snack, pre-practice snack. If it's 1 to 2 hours before, you can have small amounts of carbohydrate and fat and protein. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, for example, fruit with a little bit of nut butter, trail mix that has some nuts and some seeds in it, plus some M&Ms or some raisins or something like that. If you have less than 30 minutes before, you're kind of getting to that point where you want to simplify your food even more, because if you're going to get on your bike and go right away, you don't want any protein or you don't want a lot of fat sitting in your gut, because that's kind of that feeling when we like have heavy legs or we feel like we have a brick sitting in our stomach. It's because you had too much protein, too much fat, too close to your workout. So then we're eating more simple carbohydrates. And here's an idea here, right? Like mostly carbohydrates closer to the workout starting. If you've got more time, 60 minutes plus 30 minutes for some people. Again, this is very individual, but this is a starting point for all of you to think about is if I have less than 30 minutes, I'm going just pure carbohydrates. If I've got more time, I can have a little bit more complexity here, and that's totally fine. Okay.
And I played a few just scenarios for our riders or athletes on here, and just to
Yeah.
get them thinking about this. Okay, so we have there's programs where there's practices from 5 to 7 p.m. So I know that's like
Mm-hmm.
right over dinner time for most people. I'm not sure what everyone is doing before that, but they're probably at some sort of camp. They may be coming from home. And then your recommendations, for a full balanced meal is what, 2.5 to 3 hours? So I'm not sure most people are eating a balanced meal around 3, 2 o'clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you approach that leading into it? Like
Yep.
obviously I think getting in a good snack beforehand, the practice is a good idea. Then you have practice from 5 to 7, 2 hours, and then car ride home, half hour, and then you're at home at 7:30. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
parents bring food, in the car, but just, if you have any kind of advice for maybe how to approach it. I know everyone's situation is a little bit different. But then
Yep.
sure, I'll let you answer that one and then I'll play out the next
Okay.
one.
Perfect. So let's assume that you're eating lunch like around like noon to 1 or so, like that, right? You've got this big gap where the thing that you want to avoid is not eating anything before that 5 p.m. practice. You want to have a pre-workout snack. So that recommendation comes from like, it's not to say that you have to eat a meal like 2.5 or 3 hours before, but it's to say that if you are like, make sure that you're not eating that full meal like an hour or 30 minutes before, because then you're going to feel it. So have a pre-workout snack. If it's been more than 2.5 hours, 2 hours since your last meal, have a pre-workout snack. And this is where these kind of options can come into play, because yeah, you definitely don't want to not have some like go from lunch to practice and then suddenly you go from lunch to practice to dinner at 7:30 and you're 6 7 hours without eating it. anything unless you've eaten something during practice, which is also ideal, right? But like
Hmm.
that's an easy scenario to probably find yourself in. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that's good. Like what I see often too is like they forget to have that pre-ride snack, and then we get
Yep.
started with practice, and then maybe they didn't quite get a snack in, and all of a sudden it's 5:30 and we have a snack. Well, your body probably can't even use that snack that they for energy for 30 minutes after you digest it, and you get way too far behind. So I think
Yeah.
finding a way, like Yuri said before, have like a snack stash in your car on the way to
Mm-hmm.
practice, so you always have something on hand, and then find a way to remind yourself to eat that,
Mm-hmm.
on these timelines that we see right here based on, 30 to 60 minutes before, maybe you planned it out a little bit better. Or if you're 0 to 30 minutes before practice, you're like, oh crap, I didn't eat anything. Like have a few
Yep.
of both of these things on
Mm-hmm.
hand, because if you forget to eat when practice comes around and then, it's practice, you just get too far behind.
Yep. It's really easy to
Um,
get too far
so I'm
behind
getting
for
kicked
sure.
out. The little guy's got to go to sleep.
I have a question from Cody here. Is eating lunch on the trail bad? Not if you can tolerate it. Like if you're sitting there and eating a sandwich with some protein in it and cheese and some lettuce or something like that, if you can get up and you can go and ride your bike and you don't feel your stomach doesn't bother you, then you've probably, without even knowing it, trained your gut to be able to tolerate a higher amount of protein and fat than is like the average recommendation. And that's not bad. And if that's your opportunity to get in lunch and not feel hungry for the rest of your effort, then get it in. But if it's feeling disruptive and it's not making you feel great and you kind of feel it in your gut for the rest of your ride, then I would have lunch after and have a higher carb snack during when you're on the trail.
Yeah, so the other one I was gonna bring up, I think it kind of points out this a little bit, but early morning practices, 8:30. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how many kids are getting up at 6 o'clock to eat their bowl of
Yes.
oats or eggs and toast, you know? So say they're waking up at 7:30, they got about an hour. Like, do they need to worry that they didn't get a full meal in, or should they approach it by having something like a bagel with a small amount of cream cheese here, cereal with milk, and
Yes.
then say it's a 3 hour practice? How would you kind of time that out?
Yep. So this is where, yeah, I don't want you to wake up just to sit there and eat a full meal and like sit there and wait for it to digest for 2.5 hours or something like that. Have the carbs with a small amount of protein and fat based on what you can tolerate, like these options here. And then after your practice, that's when you have your more balanced breakfast. You have a bigger meal. The thing to know too and keep on the radar is, hey, I'm going into this workout with not much fuel on board because I only had one eating opportunity instead of a 5 p.m. practice. So I need to make sure that I'm fueling enough and I'm fueling intentionally during this practice because I've only had one thing to eat today. So that's where it just becomes even more important that you are fueling during the effort as well. Naomi, if you keep snacks in the car, keep in mind bears. I used to keep almonds in my car and a bear sniffed them out, opened my car and helped himself. Good call. Yes. Um, I don't know about all of you, but I have this like basket, a cloth basket from Target. It's my car basket. And I have like my wallet in there. I have a water bottle in there. I have snacks in there, and it comes with me every day, like into my car and out of my car. And then I can have snacks in there, right? And it's just like so that there's not a bunch of stuff ending up in my car all the time, but it just goes back and forth. And I found that super helpful. So highly recommend the car basket. You start feeling hungry on a ride. Is that a signal to have more than your usual amount of food per hour for that hour? Not necessarily. It's more so likely that you didn't eat enough leading up to the effort, and now that hunger is catching up with you. Like the amount of food per hour for that hour during exercise is more going to be carbohydrate focused. Carbohydrates don't prevent hunger, they give you energy. So, what prevents hunger is like fats and proteins and fibers. So, you could add small amounts of fats and proteins if you're getting hungry on a ride. Just be mindful that it's not, 15, 20 gram protein bar, like a Cliff Builder bar, for example, and have it be more of like a mini RX bar, for example, or a half of a protein bar or something like that. Do these recommendations change at all given the intensity of the upcoming ride? For example, race versus endurance ride. Yes, Carson, that's a great question. So for high intensity, our body really prefers to and can digest and utilize pure carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, like the mostly carbs on this, and also like gels and gummies and liquid nutrition. For endurance rides, when the intensity is a little bit lower, when it's like, hey, I just got to keep pedaling for the next, few hours, you do have a little bit more flexibility to be able to tolerate. Your gut can literally tolerate more complex carbohydrates. So like dried fruit, for example, or fruit, or like a small, like a half of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like that. Um, or just like little bits of fat and protein for that hunger prevention. So if somebody's like that other question that Penny asked, if someone's hungry on a ride and they need to prevent hunger, their stomach is growling, or they're just feeling, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten enough today, I'm hungry, then you're probably going to want to decrease the intensity to be able to allow yourself to tolerate some small amount of fat and protein. Good questions. Okay, I'm going to keep moving along so we can make sure to cover all this information. Um, this is just a helpful slide to kind of explain like macronutrients when I'm talking about simple carbs versus complex carbs versus protein and fat. Um, it's confusing sometimes out there. And there's crossover between some of this stuff. Like protein often has fat in it. So they can be a combination of both. Fruits, like if we take a fruit like an apple, that's a complex carbohydrate because it has fiber in it. It has fiber on the skin. If we juice that apple, we turn it into a simple carbohydrate because we've removed all the fiber. So that's a nice way to think about complex carbohydrates versus simple carbs. Complex carbohydrates typically have their fiber inherently in them. If we remove their fiber, like if we take brown rice and we remove the fibrous lining in it, then it's going to be white rice and it's going to be a simple carbohydrate instead of a complex carbohydrate. So that's a good way to look at it. Again, no right or wrong here, no bad or good here. This is just simple carbs, complex carbs, protein, fat. Okay. Um, when you're in it, here's what you want to do during training and racing. Okay. The general rule here is that if your effort is longer than 60 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, like 60 minutes hard, 90 minutes, any intensity, no matter what, you do want to be fueling during. And this is even more important for my junior athletes, and especially important if you go into the effort and you haven't fueled well leading up to it, whether it's because you just woke up and rolled out of bed and you're heading to practice, or because, oh man, I haven't eaten in a while and I need to start fueling earlier on. That's okay. This is like the starting point, and there's going to be nuances to it. But absolutely, without a doubt, if it's a hard effort that's 60 minutes or more, and if it's any effort that's 90 minutes or more, you want to replace about half of the calories you burn every hour with fuel, primarily high carb fuel. Little bits of fat and protein is fine, but primarily carbohydrates. Okay. Now, the question is going to be like, okay, well, how many calories am I burning per hour? Right? Um, this depends on the person. This depends on their size. This depends on their power output. This depends on their fitness, their training, all sorts of different things. On average, people will burn between 200 to 600 calories an hour, depending on all those factors. So that means a really good starting point for anyone is like, can I aim to consume about 100 calories per hour? If someone doesn't have a baseline, start there and test that out. Feel how that feels. That's 25 grams of carbs per hour. 25 grams of carbs per hour. Build up from there. Not everyone needs, rarely do most people need, 100, 120 grams of carbs per hour. You only need that if you're burning like 1,000 calories per hour. And yeah, there's really high level athletes that are doing that, but more is not always better. So for those of you that don't have a strategy, just think about, like what's a realistic baseline that I could start with and try to stay consistent with and see how you feel from there. I'm going to aim for 100 calories per hour or 25 grams of carbs per hour for the next few weeks. See how I feel for any effort over 1 hour. Go from there, build from there, test it out. Okay. It's better to have some sort of intentional strategy than none at all. Um, the other thing is like if you have a quick 45, 60-minute effort, as long as you go into that well fueled, you may be fine with, you know, a scoop of Scratch Labs or Tailwind or something like that in your bottle, and that's all you need. If you go into it in a deficit, you might need a little bit more than that. This is to Carson's question again, is like you can match the intensity of your effort to the type of food at high intensities. Simple carbohydrates, easy to chew, liquid calories, gels, gummies, that kind of stuff can be better because they're easier to get in because you're working hard. At lower intensities, you can have more complex carbohydrates or simple carbs with small amounts of fat and protein. This is some examples of foods that you can eat while you're training or racing. It's all across the board. One thing I'll say is that you don't have to just eat sweet foods. In fact, salty foods usually tend to be what you crave more because you're losing salt when you sweat and your body wants to replace that. Um, Pretzels, rice cakes, chips, that kind of stuff, especially for, you know, the long endurance efforts. When we start to get into 3+ hour efforts, that's when savory foods become more desirable and necessary. So this is all over the board, right? We've got like gels, liquid nutrition. I typically like to look at like a combination of liquid nutrition plus some solid fuel just to have some variety. Most of the time, people are going to set themselves up better, especially for longer efforts, with a ratio of at least two different types of fuels to get to their carb goal. The Scratch secret sauce, I really like this recipe, but it's taking applesauce and mixing it with the Scratch Lab super high carb. Tailwind also has a super high carb, and you can, you know, like a little packet of applesauce, a kid's snack, is very minimal on the carbohydrates and the calories just because the serving size is so small. But if you want to get, I have one in here. If you want to get like a little silicone squeezy packet, you know, like what you would feed an infant when they're starting to get into foods, and put some applesauce in it and then put some high carb in it, it can take that applesauce and turn it into something that's actually going to be really good in terms of giving you some solid calorie density. These are the little silicone packs that I have. You can take off the top and then you can fill it up. And then it's not like a standard like water bottle nipple that would be hard to get the applesauce out of, but it actually has like a hole in there where you can squeeze it out. This can be an amazing thing to send with your kid in their bag of like some just jacked up applesauce, basically, to give them some solid calories that they're going to be able to get in really easily. Okay. And a bag of this super high carb or the Tailwind super high carb will go it'll go a long way. Okay. It's genius. Elliot has a hard time with the super high carb mix. Yeah. So make it into something that like sometimes those the like liquid calories is just challenging. So if you can turn it into a little bit more of a solid and like it actually tastes quite good. I'll share this.
So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that one too with the super high carb mix because there could be some other things going on with that too. Except like if he's never used it before and he just went out there
Mm-hmm.
and tried it, it could be possibly too much for his gut to handle.
Well, no,
Um,
the gut
so
is fine. It's just
okay.
hard to mix it.
Oh, I see.
So it's more of the texture piece, I
Yeah.
think. But no,
Okay.
he does good. And he usually has that over an hour before a race.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So
Um,
good for training sometimes.
yeah.
Yes.
The other thing I'll point out here too on Yuri's list, and as she kind of alluded to before, like not everything, you know, needs to be a pre-packaged bar or gel or anything like that. Like Eleanor, hey, sweetie, here, let's talk. Like things like cookies, like if you look at the macro profile of those, it's actually pretty similar to a lot of bars that you'll find in the store, or like
Yes.
banana bread, or I think you always point this one out too. You're just going to the local bakery and getting, a
Yeah.
muffin or something like that. It's super good and delicious. So, and it's usually a little more easy on the wallet than some of the prepackaged stuff too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great
Oh,
one. And a tip for mixing the super high carb, it is hard to mix because of many reasons. It's a very concentrated source of carbohydrate. The best thing you can do is use room temperature water. That helps it mix better. And then also like fill your bottle with some water and then put the scoops of the high carb in and then shake it, let it sit for like a few minutes and then top it off with water on top of that. So you're not trying to shake it with barely any room to shake it. And letting it sit in between is really helpful as well. You can also pre-mix this stuff, like the Scratch Lab stuff, the Tailwind stuff, any of the sports nutrition stuff with sugar in it. You can pre-mix it the night before and keep it in your fridge. Or if your kid doesn't consume all of it for practice, stick it in the fridge overnight and send them out with it the next day. This stuff can last in the refrigerator. Like it can be out for a few hours during practice, but I know it's painful sometimes to like dump half a bottle down the drain because you didn't use it that day. So it does last in the refrigerator. Yeah, these are some really, really good ones here. There's just like going to your favorite bakery and going to the day old section, that big basket that sits on the counter at Clint's, for example. Like utilize that. Okay. All right. Let's talk really quick about recovery. Can anyone tell me, when do you get stronger? Do you get stronger during your workout or do you get stronger after your workout during recovery? I want to hear at least one answer from somebody.
recovery.
After. Yeah. Okay. Right. We break down everything when we are training. That is not our opportunity to get stronger. So if I have somebody that's doing their workouts and they're not doing anything for recovery after because they're like, at least I did my workout for the day, you might as well not even do your workout. All right. How you recover is you giving your body the external resources it needs to say, hey, that effort was hard. How can we make that a little easier next time and a little easier next time and a little easier next time? And that's up to you because your body does not just pull those resources from internally. It has to have those external resources in the form of carbohydrates and calories. Okay. So for recovery from endurance exercise, any effort lasting 45 minutes or more, your main consideration is carbohydrates. This is your time to get in as much glucose or carbohydrates as possible back into your depleted muscles. Because right after exercise is when your muscles are the most sensitive to insulin, which means insulin is going to carry more glucose back to your muscles and replenish it for your next workout. So typically what you're aiming for is like within 0 to 45 minutes, have a high carbohydrate snack. The longer you wait, the less effective this will be. So there is that idea of that recovery window. It's because you have a heightened sensitivity to carbohydrates. Your muscles are kind of screaming for it. Okay. Mostly carbs, a little bit of protein, chocolate milk, chocolate cow's milk, chocolate soy milk, a milkshake, a high carb snack, scratch recovery, tailwind recovery. Like there's so many things that count here. This is a recovery smoothie that I really like to make. It's about 40 grams of carbohydrates and 10 grams of protein. 4 parts carb, 1 part protein. We're looking for mostly carb, a little bit of protein. Frozen banana, 2 tablespoons of nut butter, 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder if you like chocolate. Leave it out if you don't. 1 to 2 cups of milk of choice. Cow's milk, soy milk, whatever. Put all ingredients in a blender and just blend until smooth. Super simple. Smoothies are fine. That kind of stuff is fine. Okay. So that's really everything that we're looking at for recovery. But I just want to point out that especially if you have like a drive home over the pass or something like that, or it's going to be a while until you get to eat. If it's going to be more than 45 minutes, try to get in something. Anything is better than nothing. That's mostly carbs. within 0 to 45 minutes after finishing the effort. And then that buys you a little bit of time to then like do your thing and get home and change and all that. And then eat a meal about 1 to 2 hours after that. That's the best thing you can do to get results from the efforts you're putting in. Set yourself up for recovery. Um, the other thing here that I wanted to kind of like, I talked about this a little bit, right? Like, I think we mentioned Tyler, like the day in the life, and you gave some examples here. If anyone has any examples of like, hey, what would I do in this scenario? Because this is kind of my regular schedule. Or Tyler, if you have any, like, I'm happy to chat through that with people. But this, like, making sure that you're eating enough, how and when to eat, we can look at it as eating every 3 to 4 hours as a baseline, every 2 to 3 hours for some people with high needs. Or we can look at it as like, I want to make sure that I'm having breakfast and then a snack and then lunch and then a snack and then dinner. And then sometimes even a snack after dinner if we're eating early, that kind of thing. So those are two ways to kind of look at the same thing. Anyone have any questions about that? Or anyone want to kind of like walk through their day in the life or anything like that? Okay. That's everything. I think we did pretty good on timing here. But what questions do we have? Any more questions? We can type them in the chat too, or just take yourself off mute. Thank you, Andy. You're welcome. Yes, that's it. Just three things. Pick one thing. Pick one thing and be like, okay, this is going to be my focus for the next 2 weeks. We're going to settle into this new thing. We're going to settle into making sure that, hey, if it's been more than 2 hours since we last ate, we're having a pre-workout snack, that kind of thing. Like for all of you, again, like I said, I'll share this slide deck, but truly, you've got time. It's the beginning of the season. Pick one or two things that you want to focus on for yourself, for your athletes, for your whole family, and build from there. The more you do it, the easier it gets. That's, I think, the most important thing to recognize here. And the intention is going to pay off. Like it takes time and it takes energy, especially when you start it out, but it's going to slowly and surely become just who you are and how you operate. And that's the most important thing. And I think we all have to give ourselves grace in the fact that we got a lot going on in our worlds, and our athletes have a lot going on in their worlds too. And something is better than nothing. And if we can add a little bit more intention and a little bit more intention, that's awesome. Okay. If anyone wants to contact me, this is my email, yuri.innerwild@gmail.com. My Instagram, I share tons of information on my Instagram. I'm super active on there. So follow along on my Instagram page. If someone is curious about like wanting more help with this, my job is to make this as easy as possible for my athletes. So if you're curious about what it looks like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call. And that's just where I make sure that I'm confident I can help you with what you need and that my program is right for you. So if anyone is curious about getting help with that or what that looks like, then please reach out to me or just apply for a call and I'll be in touch with you about booking that call. But this is your starting point. This is like Tyler was saying, like this is the foundation that everything else grows from. You've got to do this kind of baseline stuff. Make sure you're eating enough throughout the day. Add in a little bit more intention to like the baseline stuff, because truly that's where the change happens. We don't need to get into like the top 1% stuff until we have all this stuff dialed.
Yeah, thank you so much here. I think back to your point of like consistency is key with one to two things. As I believe
Yeah.
we are what we repeatedly do. And I was asked, I think for any athlete that, wants to show up to our practices and get faster too, it's more about being consistent and showing up to every practice versus just coming to one ride, going as hard as you can, and then not seeing you in 4 weeks, right? Same thing applies here with the
Yeah.
nutrition. And yeah, I understand it can get overwhelming at times. So I think just to pick the one to two things, get really good at it, do it every day or every practice or whatever, and then continue to build on that is a good simplified approach to take this. Like, don't bite off more than you can chew. But I would say if there's any action items after this, follow Yuri on Instagram. Always following her, like the little tidbits that she gives away on her Instagram, is gold. Like if there's one thing, follow her there, take some stuff um for what she has to share there. Certainly be sharing the slides and the resources, Yuri, that you shared here. Are you doing anything with the Breck Epic? I know sometimes you have workshops or things with them too. Are
Yep.
any of those coming up?
Yeah, we don't have any of them scheduled yet, but we will have them. And he'll share that on the Breck Epic website and also on the Instagram page.
Okay,
So yeah, definitely things to keep an eye out for. Anyone's welcome to come to those.
cool. Yeah, so I'll make sure to,
Mhm.
when I find that out, I'll share that with everyone on this call here too. And just know that I'm here as another resource to help you and your athletes with nutrition. It's something I'm passionate about too, but we're so lucky to have Yuri here because she has a wealth of knowledge and experience far beyond what I can offer. So we're just very grateful. I'm very grateful to, have her time here to share this with all of you and our local athletes. Because I believe, it's one piece of the puzzle and the athlete, the endurance athlete, and just the growing kid, right? But I think it's also often overlooked. Like people can they can stick to their training plan 5 to 7 days a week, but think about how many times you eat a day and for the rest of your life,
Yes.
right? Like, so that's why I think it's so important to get that down, especially as, busy young athletes.
Yep. Absolutely. It's great that you're exposing folks to this right now, Tyler, because I talk with people and they're like, this has never been on my radar until I'm in my 30s and my 40s. And if we can start to get intentional about this and have some knowledge now and recognize truly how impactful it can be, again, doesn't have to be complicated, but these little changes can add up and make a big difference, especially when we're starting to do it at this age, which is awesome.
Well, thank you again so much. We really appreciate you and your time, and hopefully we'll see you out on the trail sometime too.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks. Take
everybody.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.